Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Krishna. If you're new to the channel, welcome. So this time around we're going to take a look at applying attached shadows and cast shadows to a cylindrical object. We're going to take a look at two cases, the vertical cylinder and the cylinder that is at rest. And the techniques that I'm using here can be modified to create the variants for the cone and the tapered cylinder. So I'm going to show you the most simplest case here, and then you can apply that knowledge to the cones and the tapered cylinders. So I've got all of these objects on their own separate layer. This time around I have a light source that is facing away from the viewer. It is at an angle, so it's kind of going to have an impact on the cylinder. We're going to take a look first of all as to where the light source is going to hit the cylinder and where the attached and cast shadows are going to be denoted. So I've got, let me just make a brand new layer. And with this layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create I know that the light is going to hit the front part of the cylinder, but at some point the light is going to start to decay. I'm going to create a vertical line here that denotes the point at which the light will start to go from the brightest to where it's going to start to transition to a darker value. This is for the attached shadow for the cylinder. I'm also going to make a new layer, and I'm going to denote the cast shadow. So we know that when the light is hitting the right side of the cylinder, the side that's on the left will actually be our cast shadow. It's going to be on the opposite side of our light source. So again, I'm putting these sketches on their own layer. That's important. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually render the attached shadow. Let's hide the grid. Let's hide the light source. And let's hide the cast shadow for now. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this shape is fully enclosed. We're going to use the magic wand tool. Same setup as we did in the last video. We're going to click outside of the cylinder. And then we're going to inverse the selection. So if we go to select, inverse, now we have the entire cylinder selected. What we're going to do now is on the layer below our pencil rendering of the cylinder, we're going to create a blank layer. We're going to use our shader brush. I've saved that from before. And what we want to do with the shader brush is, it's just too big right now. But if I use the brush size and make it somewhat smaller, just to where it's just a little bit wider than the left edge to where the shadow begins, I think we'll be in good shape. So I can begin, let me bring my light source back, I can begin by shading the darkest part of the cylinder, making these vertical marks, and then start to bring it in and make it lighter as we start to move towards this line that I've denoted. You should see a value range from dark to medium to light. I'll deselect that. I'll get rid of my little placeholder line. And now we have the attached shadow. Now the top of this, I need to eliminate. There's a little bit of that errant shadow. I can just use my elliptical marquee tool and hit Command X, because this is only affecting this side. Now let's do the same thing for the cast shadow. Again, I'm going to make a brand new layer. I'm going to make sure that the shadow is fully enclosed. It looks like it's not, so I need to zoom in. Let me switch back to my brush tool. I need to go ahead and just make sure that there's no gaps. And I know that this line right here, I'll just make an added selection here just to make that nice and round. You can see that I have a little bit of a thicker stroke here and I want it to look more seamless. So I'll make a brand new layer. Put this layer underneath the attached shadow layer and come in with my shader brush. And I need to make the brush just a little bit bigger. And I'm going to shade in the direction, keeping in mind that it's going to be the darkest where there's no light. And it gets progressively lighter and then I can hide that guide It's not super smooth because of my pencils, but I can always clean that up. I can also move it into position, just kind of make it look nice and even. And now I've got my grid. I can bring the grid back, and we can see that we have our attached and we have our cast shadow. Right? That's just roughly like a very quick way of rendering that. Now we're going to do a cylinder that is actually at rest. So let's go ahead and hide all the other pieces except for our grid. And we're going to repeat the same process. We want to first of all denote where the light starts to decay. This light is coming down here. So we fully expect we're going to create a line on the attached shadow. This is where we think that the light will start to get, darker. We're going to start to see more shading come in as this rounded form goes to the bottom edge of this cylinder. And then we're also going to have I'm just going to do both at the same time here. This is going to be our attached shadow. Notice that I'm putting those on a separate layer. Let's go ahead and hide the grid. Let's hide the light source. Let's hide the shading. We'll use the magic wand tool. We'll select outside of the cylinder. We'll inverse the selections. We'll go to select inverse. We'll turn on our lines for our shadows. We'll make a new layer. We'll choose our shader brush tool. We'll make it just a little bit wider than the actual edge to where the shadow is going to start. We'll paint in this general direction. And we'll make it lighter as we start to move towards that point. And darker at the bottom, like so. And while we're at it, we've got some extra edges over here. I want to also make a new layer, and I'll paint the cast shadow. Because the shadow is very, very close, we can render that in a darker value. Now we can bring everything back. And now we've got our light source. We've got our attached shadow, and we have our cast shadow here. There's just a little bit of an area that I want to clean up. Again, selection tools can make short work of this. Just cleaned up this cap here. And you could also say that this region here might have some shading as well, because it's not directly facing that light, right? So if I make this just a little bit wider, I'll put this on its own layer. Make the shader brush just about a little bit bigger than the cap. And this will be more of an even shading. It's not going to have a value transition because it's a flat surface. And there we go. We now have a light source, we have attached shadows, we have cast shadows, and it works the same way with the cylinder and the tapered cylinder. The same concept applies to both. There's just, the tapered cylinder has one cap that's smaller than the other, and the cone has a point instead of a second cap. So those are some things that I'm going to have you explore on your own, but the technique is the same. In the next video, we'll take a look at how do you shade rectangular structures. And actually, that's going to be pretty easy. So stick around. See you next time.